Hello, this is Kyou of Kyou System. Done a few different takes now trying to start talking about what's floating around in my head at present, and I keep throwing them out, and it's not because of, like what I talked about in the previous video, where it's this feeling of, oh, it has to be right or whatever. No, in this case, it's something that is just a much more kind of unpleasant and abstract sort of thing, and trying to talk about it has just been I end up just tripping up all over my words, and I don't get anywhere even if you're talking for a few minutes. And this particular evening, I had a mood swing, and I ended up feeling, even though I was in a fairly decent mood, I am feeling very just overcome with this feeling of disgust and alienation, which are not new feelings for me by any stretch of the imagination. They're feelings that have recurred in me. I don't even think I could hope to count how many times over the course of my lifetime. And of course, it's like, well, everyone experiences that, Kyo. It's like, it's not what I mean. Because this particular feeling of alienation is just, something that this and the feeling of disgust is just, it's not something that's limited to one specific stimulus where, it's like, oh, well, you see something and it's gross and you feel, disgusted from it. It's like, it's more like a more almost existential kind of feeling. And not like existential isn't the right word. I don't know. The bottom line is that I'm just I don't even know how to put it into words. And again, I guess I'll just whatever. I'm not going to do any more retakes. I'll just keep talking into this one, and if two people listen to it and no one else listens, whatever. Again, this is just supposed to be an outlet, so whatever. And it's very frustrating because there's been a number of things lately that are, I guess, I don't know if it's just perceptions or just things that are outside of my ability to control that I just have to sort of deal with. And there have been any number of things like that, especially over the course of this year, where it's just like, well, yeah, this sucks that this happened to you, but there's literally nothing you can do about it, and you sort of just have to endure it. And don't worry, you'll just get through it. It's just one more thing you have to get through, and then the whole year is just an endless procession of things that I have to get through, one after the other, and then eventually it starts getting to a point where it starts to feel like, the whole past several years, hell, most of my life, have just been an endless procession of things that I just have to get through. And not like, oh, this, everything is just phases or whatever. It's more so that it's just experiences that are stressful and unpleasant and difficult to deal with, and that I can control them to an extent and lessen them and minimize them, but the by and large, they're just things where I just have to deal with it. And eventually they'll get resolved, or they'll go away, or I'll acquire enough resources to be able to, take care of it or whatever. But until then, it's just hours and days and weeks and months of just having to deal with it, and it just generally not being a super great kind of experience. And it's like and then it's just that happening over and over again. But the thing is, there are some things where it's like, okay, this is like a temporary kind of phenomenon, like some of the chronic health issues I have. It's like, all right, this is just something that is occurring, that is like a temporary thing that your body will recover from in due time. Like to give an example, I got a really bad case of food poisoning, and it was awful while it was happening. Just constantly having to run to the bathroom, being kept up through the night with nausea and pains and all this other stuff. Been not getting any sleep, still having to go into work while being sleep deprived, all that stuff. But eventually, eventually, even though it was the worst food poisoning I've ever had in my life, it eventually went away. And that's great. But then there's other things that are just permanent or semi-permanent, and they kind of ebb and flow. And it's things like, well, okay, so yeah, you have psychological trauma from things that happened to you in your childhood and adolescence, and that's just, full stop. This is a fact of the matter. And sure, I've gotten to a point to where the PTSD responses aren't nearly so bad. The explosive anger isn't nearly so bad on good days, right? But it's still is never going to just not be there. It's still just like this deep-rooted thing that is like an immovable part of my, like, or just this deep-rooted part. It's like a foundational thing in my personality. And don't let me give you the wrong impression. I'm not saying, oh, I'm defined by my trauma. That's not it. What I'm trying to say is that it's more a matter of just having these feelings of things like alienation and disgust and, just feeling out of place no matter where I go. And it's like these things that are just rooted in my head, that are just over the years and years and years that I've been growing and working to overcome working to process all of my trauma and acknowledge them as just things that happened to me rather than, something that is a part of who I am. But that there are effects from the trauma, like things that are like neurological changes in structure in my central nervous system as a result of what I've experienced that just, aren't just going to go away. I mean, sure, they'll be lessened, but it's not, I still feel really alienated. I still feel really dissociated. I still have these flare-ups of explosive anger or of feeling terribly out of place or feeling disgusted from just the tiniest things, just out of nowhere, can just cause a mood swing. And sure, it's happened. Well, see, for a while it was happening much less often. I guess, I don't know, maybe today is just a bad day, or maybe because of this ebb and, the ebb and flow of my mental health, as it were, because it's been ebbing thanks to all of the things that I just had to get through this year. Now I'm having these, my irritability is higher, more prone to these kinds of mood swings. Who can say, I guess. But the bottom line is that I just, again, it's just more stuff that I have to deal with. And sure, it's like, all right, well, days will get better, sure. But again, it's like, how many more phases of my life am I just going to have to get through? At what point does life start being something where I'm not having to endure some sort of hardship or some tribulation, and where, things are just like pleasant? And it's like, well, unfortunately, it's kind of unclear because of all sorts of different reasons. And I'm sure you can argue, well, it's a matter of perspective, right? You just need to, reframe how you're thinking about things and try to make changes in your life to make things more positive and things like that. It's like, well, okay, to an extent, that is true. But then again, it's like, whatever. I'm arguing with no one here. This internal dialogue is, But, so, as is probably pretty evident, it's something that has been giving, a lot of internal stress for me, trying to just get back to a point, or, what I was is at a point where a lot of this wasn't so much of an issue, but again, like, being reminded of a lot of these things is what is, I think that is a lot of what it is like these reminders of how out of place I feel, these reminders of things that happened to me, and these reminders of things that have been taken away from me, and things where, like, to give another example, it's like things like being reminded of how, when being in a relationship and then like having that person leave you, and then, seeing reminders of that, and suddenly there are happy couples all around you, right? Or you see all sorts of pictures and things that remind you of your ex, right? It's like you suddenly just start seeing it everywhere, and then for stuff like that, it's like, well, people are like, well, there's plenty of other fish in the sea. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe, but I was, I like this person so much, I was planning to marry them, and then now they're gone, right? Like, and it's just very difficult to deal with, especially when you combine that with a lot of isolation and there's such issues like, you're in a bunch of online communities, right? And then which you were kind of pushed into using more than in-person communities because thanks to COVID and a lot of your old social circles and the like got thrown into disarray because of that, and then now even though you're trying to rebuild your social circles, but that's slow going, and in the meantime a lot of your online circles have started to die off, and so you have all these other issues going on, and then yeah, so I don't have a point, I guess, that I'm trying to make. It's just very frustrating to be at a point where even when things are like starting to get better, it's still, some days it doesn't really feel like it's getting any better. And I guess maybe it's just a matter of, hey, maybe it's just a bad day and you just have to get through it and then it'll be better tomorrow. But then hey, here we go again. It's just another thing you have to get through, right? How many more of those are there going to be? Well, okay. And again, it's like, then there's this other feeling of where it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't, it's like I'm all, woe is me, right? Even though, whatever. This is supposed to be an outlet for me anyway, right? So it doesn't matter if some of it kind of sounds like, I'm throwing a pity party for myself when I'm really just trying to express this feeling. And I'm sorry if this isn't as interesting as the other ones. I'm sorry if this is, lower quality material or whatever. Sorry to disappoint if that's the case. But, yeah. If you did actually sit and listen through all this and enjoy it, I'm glad. At least someone is getting something out of this. Hopefully I'll have something more pleasant to talk about next time around. We'll see. I hope for both of our sakes that I do. Until then, take care.